But right now, it's history in the making. Less than a day after refusing to step down from power, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has resigned and handed control to the military.
Vice President Omar Suleiman made the announcement this morning, sparking celebration in the streets of Cairo and across the nation. It's an incredible reversal of fortunes for the people-powered revolution who just last night were outraged when Mubarak refused to read the writing on the wall.
Joining us today in Toronto, we have Mohamed El Rashidy, a director of the Canadian Arab Federation. Beside him, John Thompson of the Mackenzie Institute. And here in our studio is Atif Kubursi, an economist and expert in the political machinations of the Middle East. Atif, was Mubarak simply trying to save face yesterday? And what forced him to capitulate today?
Well, he looked adamant as if he's going to remain in power. But he certainly was, to some extent, marking time. What made him change his mind, I think, is the military. It was very clear that the military tried earlier the day to project its power and tell Mubarak that from now on it is this military council that has been formed from the leaders of the army would be calling the shots. And they tried to preempt Mubarak before he went to air. But Mubarak, in his general form and in his tradition, went on and devolved some powers to Omar Suleiman. The army had to act. It was also a situation that perhaps behind the scenes, and no one is certain about it, is that the Republican Guards were still loyal, and they're part of the military who were not willing to go with the Joint Chief of Staffs. But in the final analysis, they capitulated.
Mohammed, do Egyptians want Mubarak to leave the country now or be brought before the courts to answer for his actions, not to mention give back the billions of dollars that he's suspected of amassing for his own personal fortune?
Yes, definitely. They definitely want him. First step was to have him out of power, which took place despite his very stubborn resistance. But the next step, definitely, as the days go on, you'll see people turn more towards retribution, if you will, and they will start going after him. There are already news of assets being frozen abroad, and the Egyptian people, I think, will want someone to pay for the crimes that have been committed, hopefully over the 30 years, but particularly in the last few days. And Mubarak is at the head of these decisions that carried out the crimes.
And what do you think the people then want besides his ouster, which they have already achieved? Are you talking about perhaps jail time?
No, it's going to be difficult it's going to be very difficult to put him in jail. That situation is still developing. I think at this point people are very happy. They're celebrating, and rightly so. They're ecstatic. This is an incredible achievement that certainly very few people ever even imagined. And once that phase passes, there will definitely be problems for Hosni Mubarak in relation to his wealth. Whether his personal property, whether he himself is in danger, I would say he's going to leave the country. I don't think he would be able to stay in Egypt and remain safe. After the 400 plus deaths, and expect as the regime crumbles completely, the remnants of it and the prison and torture chambers open up, a lot of skeletons are going to come out, and he's going to want to be out of there, and everyone related to him will follow suit, if they haven't already.
Interestingly put when you use the word skeletons. And John Thompson.
Literally.
Yes. John Thompson, could the Egyptian army remain in control beyond the scheduled election for this fall?
Probably. In fact, that might actually, if you really look honestly at the way Egypt has worked in the last 50 or 60 years, that might be one of the outcomes to hope for. The army is more or less a secular institution. Egypt is not about to embrace democracy. It's not about to become a modern democratic society by any means. And if you look at it, the unrest was sparked by two issues that have gone unredressed. One was the specific spark was not the incompetence of the government or its corruption. That's been its normal state of affairs for decades. That's the normal state of affairs for the elites who run most of the Middle East. The specific spark was food prices, which are climbing very, very high all around the world. This is going to be a year with a lot of tumult. And food prices are going to remain high, and they might even get worse later on. But that's what drove people into the streets. The other thing was, part of the triggering mechanism was the Muslim Brotherhood, which sensed an opportunity, and they haven't quite been able to reach it, but they still may want to try. Egypt is a long way from being in a stable situation. In fact, a lot of countries around the world, particularly in the Middle East, are going to be in a very unstable year.
Atif, I want to go back and talk about Vice President Omar Suleiman. Is he now in control of the day-to-day administration? And if so, who is he and who is running the government?
Well, I mean, it's made clear that the Army Joint Chief of Staff would be running the show. They probably would not micromanage the economy and the polity. They certainly would have a government with ministers that would be answerable to them. I am convinced that the Egyptian people have made history in a very serious way, and that way is that they have themselves gained and wrestled this freedom and this ability to govern themselves. This was not given to them. This was not a gift. This was not charity. I disagree with John in the sense that the Egyptian people have stood fast, stood their ground, have made the sacrifices, and we should not begrudge them that. And there is nothing incompatible about Egypt and democracy. In the past 3 decades, 4 decades ago, or more, at least in the 40s for sure, Egypt had a very thriving democracy, had a parliamentary democracy. And in many respects, the tradition of democracy in Egypt is to be reclaimed, it's not to be reinvented. And what the people have done is an incredible achievement, and this is going to play. You can't take them back to any part of their history. There is no way the reels of history are going to be rolling backwards.
Atif, what was the difference between Egypt under Sadat and Egypt under Mubarak?
Well, you know, I mean, the two were two of a kind. I mean, they came to power as military people. One was literally handed over by Nasser, in some sense, the other one by the Sadat, but he came on the wheel of an assassination. But there is really little difference except the incredible escalation in the theft of the state. And
so are you suggesting then that Nasser was a more democratic?
No, well, I mean, it reflected maybe the interest and the acquiescence of the people. I mean, when he died, there were millions of people who really went to the streets. No one is suggesting that Nasser was allowing the democratic institutions. Actually, one of his major mistakes was he did not allow the people to participate. He wanted them to be just simply cheerleaders and spectators. No, there was no democracy under Nasser, but it certainly no one can deny that under Nasser the people felt that in tune with the policies of Nasser. They did not feel the same way about Sadat, and Mubarak particularly, because there was all this corruption, there was all this denial of basic freedom. The regime became more and more isolated, but what really broke the camel's back was this attempt on the part of the regime to recreate itself and prolong its life through handing the powers to one of the children.
Atif, I'm going to, sorry.